How was opening weekend? Must be a
Good.
whirlwind. Hey, you've literally just been in a blender. Is it 4 weeks
Yeah,
from landing
I
to
think
first game?
yeah, it's been really quick here. It was such a late signing to come to Vancouver. So it's been really it's been fun, but it's as far as being prepped and everything else, it's taken a little bit of time here though. But it's been good. Like Mags has been awesome. Caden Jarvis and Barkley and the whole staff has kind of helped me make that transition pretty easy.
That's cool. How many guys do you still have at pro camps, or how close are you to your roster?
We still got Lipinski and Honzik still there, and we
Yeah,
got Leslie Kidd back today here. So we're hoping we may get these guys back for the weekend, but we're not sure yet.
got it. Got it. I was so I think that in junior hockey there's like this. There's like pre 1990 and post 1990, and there's a different kind of junior hockey back in the day. So
Yeah.
I've talked to a couple guys on this show who played in the Western League in your era, and not to get crass, but in their words, the Art Hauser Center was fucking terrifying to roll into back in those days. What are your recollections of being on the home bench?
Well, just to show you how old I am, we used to call it was the Communiplex when I played
Oh,
back
really?
in,
Okay.
back in the back
The
in
the
the 80s.
Smarty seats.
Yeah, oh yeah. And there was it was certainly an intimidating place to play. There's no question about it too. I remember when we first started out, like in our goal season, um, we were all like, the first year in the Western League. We were a bunch of young kids that literally got beat up every night, and on the scorecard too, and scoreboard. And I know that second year as a group we grew together, and we kind of made a pact. We're not going to let this happen anymore. So we took major steps that second year with Terry Simpson and Rick Wilson as our coaches, and then you could see this group kind of build together, and they made some really good trades. And in the third year, we ended up winning the Memorial Cup, which is, nowadays is really difficult to do, but it's
No kidding.
something I'll never forget.
No kidding. And so back then, when PA was an expansion team, was because there was no obviously Bantam draft. Like, was there an expansion draft? Like, did they list you? How did they put that initial roster together?
They had bought the list from, I think it was that time, there was a list of players they bought from the Great Falls Americans, I believe.
Got it.
And so there was a group of us. There was me, Dave Pizzine, Danny Hodgson, and another guy named Tony Grenier, I believe it was, on that list. And by God, I can't remember all the names,
Yeah.
but so they took that group there with that we were on that list, and we're the ones that ended up be playing on that team all the way through right to the Memorial Cup.
And an interesting story, like with Terry Simpson, I just in doing research for this, like he was an electrician
Yes.
before he
Yeah.
gets, so he was in retires, was in Jacksonville, whatever league that was in, back to PA, electrician, takes over the junior A team. They have I think it was a 9-year run,
Yeah.
and then replicates that magic with you guys. What stands out to you about him as a coach in that era?
Well, you know what? Him and Rick were so influential for me personally as far as my career going forward. They made it really, uh, enjoyable to be part of an organization. At that time was from they're playing the junior A days, and then, but winning was in their culture, and you knew that when you got there, they're playing in Prince Albert was part of it. So they installed a culture of winning really early. And that first year, obviously, was a difficult year because the expansion was tough. But after that, they made the right moves to bring the players in, and plus also the players that they had listed to bring in like that. And they developed a really credible culture really early on. And you can see that for years to come after that too, though. And both those guys went on to long National
Yeah.
Hockey League careers, Terry and Rick. And, wherever they went, they've always done well.
So I'm curious, like when you talk about a culture of winning, I mean, obviously, I would assume that that's what you're looking to establish in Vancouver. I mean, frankly, that's what every coach is trying to do. Anything specific that you felt that they did that translated into how your group performed on the ice?
Well, I think, as far as this is, one thing for me resonate always, and this is how we do things here. Even back then, this is what a PA rater does. This is what we do. This is what our culture. We whatever we do better than the other team. And if we're not as good as the other teams, then we'd strive to become as good as them, or emulate some of the stuff that they did too. And coming here to Vancouver again, very fortunate enough. The place was in a really good place already with Michael Dick, and they already started establishing that winning culture here. Obviously, they were in a rebuild after they went to the finals, though, but you could see that in these players here that it's already been started. So I'm coming in, at the tail end of this rebuild, and a lot of the stuff that I want to implement has been already here. And they did a great job with these kids, and that's something that going forward that we're just trying to reinforce to get our kids at the next level.
When you were first hired, you kind of did the media circuit, and obviously we're in the same market as you guys, but you talked about not just getting to know the players, but getting to know the players with the purpose of establishing trust. Again, you're about 4 weeks into your tenure here. Where does that shift in terms of communicating and getting to know a player to like taking the maybe the necessary steps to establish trust?
I just think is like I said, just being yourself more than anything.
Yeah,
You don't be something that you're not, and I think the players already know within a month how my demeanor is. They know how I react when things aren't going well. They know how I react when things go well. And I think the biggest thing for me is when I come to the rink every day, and from my staff, is that we're the same people every single day, whether it's a loss or a win the night before, that they
love
know
that.
what they're going to expect from this group every day. So, like this morning, we had a day off yesterday. This morning, the kids come in, and first thing I ask them is, "How was your weekend? What did you do?" Those type of things, and they, which is good. Now all of a sudden, we've been into it like 4 weeks deep now, and the kids are coming in, Manny, how was your weekend?
That's
And I
awesome.
told them it was terrible. I had to go went shopping at Costco all day yesterday. So it was, so just that's like
Yeah,
I like keeping it light, and we're getting it's time for us to get to work. It's time for us to get to work though, but you can't be talky 24/7 every day, because it's these kids got so much going on. They got school, they got family life, they got being away from home. So the environment is obviously, and it's a cliche, it's got to be a good, safe environment. Everybody says that, but it does take time and effort to make sure you're actually establishing that environment every day.
are you a snack guy when you go to Costco, or you just head down and get in and out as quick as you can, or do
I
you hit?
buy everything that we don't need, and my wife was like, when I meet them back at the checkout counter, she says, "We don't need this. We don't need this." I buy stuff that we will have in the fridge for months, bulk size, we don't need. So,
That's
I'm
amazing.
pretty well. I'm what do you just say? Not scrutinized, but I'm being babysitted when we get to the shop to the checkout counter for sure.
That's great. That's great. If I was to ask your players, um, what your expectations are in practice, or perhaps what some of the key tenets are, what would they tell me?
Um, I think first be pace, pace of practice, and execution. It's one thing is for me is no matter what level you're at, American Hockey League, WHL or NHL. I think that's your time, your hour and 15, hour and a half. That's your time to get better, improve on things. So for me is execution. So if we're doing a passing drill, or simple passing drill to warm up, and guys without any resistance. And if our practice is sloppy, I'll blow it down, and just tell them how important it is. A lot of times, these kids are going through their drills without understanding how valuable it is for them to get those touches. And practice is where you're getting those touches. You're not going to get as many in games. So when you're on the ice and you're touching the puck, whatever, between 80 to 100 times on the ice, you need to utilize that time here. So that's one thing they understand for me is that mistakes are fine. That if
Yeah.
you're working hard on things, but I do expect execution as far as what we're doing, especially on our skill drills. And that's something that's important that's the only time that these kids are going to have that opportunity to get better.
So, I mean, you talk about pace. I mean, the obvious answer to that is that pace is kids got to skate faster through the drill, but beyond the obvious, what are some things that you've learned to implement in practice to pick up the pace, whether that's the speed of the drill itself or perhaps just the transition from one thing to the next, so you maximize that time that you have?
Well, I think what we wanted to implement as much as possible. And every drill we're doing is at full speed. So if you get used to that fact that you're practicing at a certain tempo all the time, so when the games get to you, it kind of slows down in a sense.
Yeah,
I know you can't always implement game situations because it's a different level, but if you're used to pushing that envelope, so to speak, at a pace, and so when you're in a game situation, it's something that's not you're not unaccustomed to it. As an example, I like to use is, especially when our kids come back from NHL camps right now, they're used to a certain pace of practice, which comes natural for
great.
the
Yeah,
professional hockey players, and for the junior players, they've got to realize, okay, I got to have an extra gear just to keep up in practice. So that's something that we try to implement when we're doing our drills. If you're doing that at that type of pace in practice, it becomes automatic to you in game situations. And it's not just a skating part of it too; is about playing fast. Handling the puck. Making plays under pressure, those type of things where you're able to, be able to make those plays when things are happening at a different level during the game.
you mentioned the individual skill development, and I don't know how much, say, your practice today looks compared to maybe when you first started coaching, or probably even when you played in the league. But how much time, even just through like camp, how much time would you have spent or allocated time to spend on individual skill development? And I know that you've got some great coaches alongside you to kind of, you know, delegate those responsibilities. But how much do you prioritize that?
Well, as much as we can. Like today, for instance, we don't play till Friday, so we're going to utilize today of getting our defensemen and our forwards out together and working on skill set as individual for forwards and defensemen here. It's the fundamentals, guys. No matter what sport you're in, it's the fundamentals of how you practice the proper way and technique. Whether it's taking pucks off the wall, receiving passes or shooting on the move and those type of things. And one sport I always look at is fundamentally, if you've got some flaws in your, for instance, golf swing, it's going to show up.
Yeah,
and
especially
and
mine.
that's something. Yeah, well, everybody's.
Yeah,
And there's a perfect imperfect sport, so to speak, and
yeah.
that's something that we're trying to work on. These guys that we're teaching them the fundamentals that they're able to be able to get that down pat. So when they're able to do that at high speeds, so those flaws will not be showed as much. And so we're trying to work on the things that we think that these kids need all the time. And these kids nowadays are so skilled. They're
Yeah.
working on this stuff already, way before we even get them, though. But we're trying to even improve those and just fine tune them. So, as we see throughout the year, that they're improving here too. Like the beginning of the season right now, everything's a little bit sloppy.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that we saw ourselves the other night there, that we need to improve on those areas of simply receiving passes at full speed, whether it's on your forehand, backhand, or not just receiving it, but putting yourself in the position as far as where you're skating in, break it down, you're skating to receive that pass at full speed too. So, like, there's such a wide gambit of different things that we need to work on. We try to isolate those in once a week or twice a week to really concentrate on different things that the kids need to work on.
Do you think that, yeah, I mean, the fundamentals have always been important, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but that as our game, as the pace is picked up, as the speed is picked up, that those fundamentals might even be more important because there's less room for a kid that's or a player that's talented to maybe get by. Like, you're going to get really exposed if you can't, like, just those little things like catching pucks on your backhand. Like, if you can't do that in today's game, it's tough.
No, I totally agree. That's one thing. An example I use to the players is that if you can't receive a pass in the neutral zone at full speed on your backhand, and that's something we'll even talk about at practice. A lot of times in a game situation, that can make a difference of entry in the offensive zone or possibly even a breakaway. And, and 9 times out of 10, when those plays blow up from not receiving the pass, they're coming back in our direction, and when we're on defense. So that's even more so as far as as far as making sure that these kids are improving on those fundamentals. And this game itself too nowadays, it's about 85% of the game is played along the wall and in tight
Yeah.
corners. So you got to be able to protect the puck. You be able to get in and out of the corner quick enough, and still having a guy who's on your back trying to make a play. And so that's why these little areas of the game that we have to try to improve on all the time.
How do you, when you're leaving the rink in the afternoon or at night, how do you sort of evaluate, the pulse of your team and where you're at?
Well, usually I could see from practice how we were that day, how things are moving as far as our drills, our guys picking up what we want to do, and just actually the execution of practice. So that's something that's really important. And I know that before even practice is over with. If we're going through practice and things are flowing smoothly and the kids are understanding it and there's a lot of energy, then that's a real good day. If you see at the end of the day that we were a little bit sluggish and we were just not
Yeah.
on, there's a number of reasons for why, but we'll try to evaluate why that was. For instance, could be fatigue, could be just we just one of the off days, so to speak here. So we'll reevaluate how we were after every practice to see, and then try to change that, or sometimes do nothing for the next day. Just kind of make it so today's one of those days or a one off here. But those type of things that we do try to eliminate as much as possible are the habits and the details of practice that hopefully by the 2 3 months in that they're just automatic for our kids.
Again, just a lot of familiarity with your staff, and your assistant coach Adam Maglio. I had the pleasure of coaching him. He's just a plus human being. Don't get me going on Paul Fricker. I think we all need Paul Fricker in our life. He's the best. But when you come in as a new coach, again, like how did you? And I just think there's so much more that we have to manage as coaches in today's game, and part of that's with analytics, and everybody seems to have their specialty. How did you go about saying, okay, everybody, like we got to pool our resources here? Who's going to take on what responsibilities? And then I guess beyond that, how do you trust that the way that you know that coach might do it aligns with the way that you would want it done?
Well, first of all, you said Adam Maglio. Like I had the pleasure of working with him in Spokane. I think he's just an incredible young coach, up and coming coach, and he's current with the game. He's more importantly current with the players, and
Yeah.
the attitude of this generation. So it's a huge part of it. You see that with the kids come in, they're talking to Adam constantly all day about something, which is whether it's hockey or non-hockey related, which is really important. You can see that transition or that certain level of comfort that players have. As far as our new staff, like you mentioned, Paul Fricker, obviously comes with an incredible resume as far as how he's worked with goaltenders and stuff like that. And Caden Jarvis, who's new to our organization, first time as a skills coach and slash assistant coach, video coach in our league here. So my job, for instance, with Caden is try to mentor him as far as what I expect from him, what I want with him, as a group and as we work together here. But one thing I do let my coaches know is that I want to be told what I need to hear, not what I want to hear, and allow them to do their work. Find what they do best and let them excel at that. And obviously, you oversee that, but you got to give them that freedom and that type of responsibility for them to excel. And it all coincides to what we want to do as far as our group and that, though. But yeah, it so far has been really good, and I don't foresee it not being as run smoothly as it is. Quite honestly, as far as the goaltending with Paul, no matter where I've been, I just leave that alone.
Smart.
It's that's I think it is. I don't know all the technical and all the different things that they do with these guys, but I just tell them I will help our goaltenders on the mental part of it, as far as maybe helping them if they've had a bad game or those type of things. But from the technical side of it, I let them do their job. And obviously, if there's something not right, like that, we'll always meet together as a group here. It's not just my way or the highway, so to speak. I think no matter what you do as far as in hockey or business or more importantly family life, you got to have open communication and you got to allow people to express what they feel could help. And no better than a family. You got to have a family where you do have people, the parents, but you got to allow your kids to have the freedom to be able to be involved. And I think that's what builds that bond and that cultural of a good place to be.
Love that. Love that. I thought of you over the weekend. So Dan Marino was quoted as saying that if his era of quarterbacks played in the NFL today with the rule changes, etc. He's like we would have thrown it for 6,000 yards easy. I look at your era in junior hockey. You put up 109 points as a defenseman in
Yeah.
PA. Like, and I'm like, man, if he could put up 100 and that many, then like, what's he putting up now? Maybe you're a little bit before your time, considering what we term kind of a pro defenseman in today's game. But what would be some of the things that you learned as a player that helped you succeed then, that still apply today, and that you may have shared with your defenseman with the
Well,
Giants?
I think from the game has changed so much, as
Yeah,
far as the edge work that players, the D-men are doing, as far as just a different, there's so much more mobile in a lot of areas. And but still the fundamental part of it, a lot of it for me is like, being an offensive defenseman or the offensive side, which I really enjoyed, is that impact as far as our defenseman. I want our D up in the play as much as possible. So, a lot of times, depending on where you are, they don't want their D too much involved in the game. But I want our defensemen up into play as much as possible, and that doesn't mean they're rushing the puck, but they're coming in on this, as far as that fourth man ice or fourth man wave, so to speak. And I want to try to help them as much as possible as far as getting into the zone. So we have numbers when we're attacking the offensive
yeah.
zone. Um, I just from the offensive side, I've always loved to play the game attacking. I don't think it's does anybody good, especially when you're playing a better team. A lot of times by sitting back and waiting for them to come at you, skilled teams will come at you and pick you apart if you just wait. So my philosophy is you have to go fight fire, fire, so to speak, and get after it within reason here. But if you do that with an aggressive style, more often than not, it's going to help your team out.
Do you have when when you're encouraging your defenseman to get up in the play? Do you have any rules or reads or things that you might tell them to look out for? Be it maybe when to pull back, or maybe that might signal that they get a bit more aggressive.
Well, I think that on our exits out of the defensive zone, our breakouts, that's something that we work on all the time. And anytime we're coming out of the zone, like we want to activate our weak side defenseman. If you go from one side and you move the puck up like that, we want our weak side defenseman up in the play as an option,
Yeah,
or following up as a fourth man here. So what that does, and that's no secret, people have been doing that for a long time now. And I look at the National Hockey League. Some of the best teams in the National Hockey League have the defenseman activated all the time here. So it does spread the ice out a little bit as far as creating space, but it does create space in the middle of the ice by having your one slash forward clear the zone, where that opens up that ice for that fourth man to join the rush. So that's something that we work on since day one here is our breakouts where everybody's involved in for a D-man nowadays, that first pass, you're not done. That first pass, you're getting up ice as quick as possible, which transitions to, if there's a turnover, your gap is good anyhow. So that's something that we want to make sure that we work on all the time with.
I think you're the right guy to put this question to. So I think for the longest time, point shots from
Yeah,
defensemen. The concept was, you want to keep it sort of from the knees down,
yeah,
easier to tip, etc.
yeah,
But then in the NHL, we're seeing a lot of, and Vegas sort of came to mind last year, where they like a lot of their point shots are they're up high, and I'm assuming it's because they know something, or that the odds are that goalies are dropping down, and while they might not be as easy to tip, there's a higher likelihood that they're gonna find the way to the back net. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of where to defensemen should be trying to place pucks from the point?
Well, first of all, is what we teach our kid is that puck has to get through. The percentage of scoring from the top and there's a study I watched last year. I can't remember who did it though, but it was from the actual percentage of shots coming from the point that go in are so low,
Yeah.
even inside the dots. Outside the dots, it was almost non-existent. But when our defensemen, like every team now is so good of getting into the lanes and filling lanes. So first and foremost, we want our shots getting through. If they get through, and we can't get it towards the net, then we always want to start our attack from down low. We want to be in position to reestablish an attack offensively from down below, and that's something that we're teaching our defensemen. I don't care if it doesn't get to the net; it's just got to get through. But I agree with you as far as that tip nowadays. A lot of times players, they're getting in their equipment and holding their sticks up. There's a lot of opportunity, and these kids are so good at nowadays of hand-eye coordinations, are tipping pucks at the middle of the ice where the puck is changing directions and the goaltenders have no chance. One example is Pavelski in Dallas. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
him and Burns out of San
Unreal.
Jose, and Pete DeBoer had a chance to work with. They worked on that. And Pavelski is one of the best in the National Hockey League at his age of scoring goals, where there's shots that are mid waist or they're even higher below the shoulder, and these guys are tipping these pucks in, and there's not much a goaltender can do sometimes. You never know where it's going to go. So that's something I totally agree on too. That's something that's a different angle of attack. These goalies are so big nowadays. If that shot is not getting tipped, it's not going in. I don't care how much traffic you have in there. These goaltenders are so big.
So you've spent time coaching the National Hockey League. Obviously, you're coming in from the American Hockey League, and you touch on habits. And so you've got a room full of kids in Vancouver that would have aspirations to play professionally. What might be some of the underappreciated habits that you would say, hey, like if you want to be a pro, you got to have these areas of your game dialed in?
Well, I think first and foremost is trying to help these kids or coach them or teach them of what it is to be kind of a professional, of what it takes, not only on the ice but more importantly off the ice. Time management is huge. Like
Yeah.
these Western Hockey League, these kids they don't have a whole lot of free time. You got kids going to school in the morning, you got practice after, you got homework after. Also, they have family time, so it's tough to fit that all in one day. So we're trying to help them, if especially our younger kids at 16 years old, help them time manage where they have also time for themselves just to be a kid. I think that's really important, and if they can get that early enough, that's going to help them later going on. So if you translate that into a first year player in the American Hockey League, a lot of times it's the same issues as time management, where in junior hockey you have a lot of the stuff taken care of yourself. You're living with guest families, your
Yeah.
meals are provided. You don't have to worry about utilities and stuff like that. But a lot of time, a first year player in the American Hockey League, all of a sudden now you're
Yeah.
responsible for your own meals. Now you're responsible for getting cable, internet, rent, you're paying utilities, and it comes at you in waves. So it's very similar how we try to mentor these guys at different levels and different ways, but it's something that it's so invaluable, so that these have that opportunity that not just work and take care of all this stuff, but you have time just to relax as being just a person. So important. So that's first and foremost for me, is a challenge that I've had every year in the American Hockey League, also in junior hockey, is getting these kids on a schedule where it's they can really manage their time.
That's so critical. And I mean, listen, I mean, I coach my little guys U7 team, and that's our biggest focus right now is just is time management, making the most use of time and getting the kids dialed in with, being on time and staying on time. Manny, so you're coming from 3 years in the American Hockey League, and, just I think at first glance, you walked in there with COVID. You win the Henderson Silver Knights first season. You win the Pacific Division, um, and then you encounter some health issues. And I know you've shared part of your story, and I'm not sure how comfortable you are sharing here now. But I would just be curious. And I mean, man, I read it, and I've had both my parents have been through cancer. And I mean, when I read that, you finished treatment and were stepped into training camp 10 days later, like I had such a tough time wrapping my head around that. I maybe just to start with, when the term mental health, how would you describe that today based following your experience?
Um, there's something you take for granted, or sometimes I think more than anything, as far as being in pro hockey, like we think we're invincible. You
Yeah.
think you're like we're supposed to be macho, we're supposed to be the tough guys, and we are. Hockey players are like one of the toughest athletes in the world as far as physical wise, but we tend to forget how important the mental health part of everything is. And without your mental health, you can't survive on a daily basis. And my story here, I have no I think if I can help anybody in any aspect as far as helping them with cancer or getting through it, or even not just getting through it, what happens after the fact that you do your treatments, if I can help anybody in any way, that's during this platform is in a positive way. I love to do it. And my story was very lucky, so lucky to be able to. Hope we got everything early enough. I went through both operations of not just one cancer, but two cancers,
Yeah, I
going
read that,
through
man.
two major surgeries, and all within a short period of time. So physically, I went through a lot of obviously, yeah, it wasn't easy by any means.
Yeah.
And then just after that, though, even after my last treatments, I was done. 10 days later, I was behind the bench at camp, and I was not ready for it. I had no idea what it was. I thought it was good. I was on a high. Treatments are good. It's going to take time. Physically, I was done. I was physically just beat right up. I remember just going up the stairs. It was just tough getting up the stairs, and but the mental part of it, I was not prepared for it at all last year at all. And I went to the rink. I put on a brave face.
Yeah.
I went through the doors, did what I thought I was supposed to be doing right. But I'd go home, and that's what a difficult time for me was. And then my wife finally said, she says, "There's something, you're not right. You're not who you are. You're not who you normally are as a person." And even when I was going through my treatments and my battle was with my operations, my my attitude was, I think it was good. I was strong, was fighting it, whatever I possibly can. And I just crashed. And the doctor says, that's normal. It says, we're surprised this never happened earlier. This is normal for cancer patients after you go through your battle. And then if you're on your road to recovery, that you have nothing left in your body just to help you feel normal again. And it says, it's going to take some time. And I got the proper help through, my doctors. And I can't say enough of my one doctor. I had a personal friend of mine. His name is Patrick Pierce, PZ. He was also a team doctor I had in Spokane, but he ended up being retiring and moving to Henderson, Nevada.
No
And he
way.
was our team doctor there. And I call PZ my caddy because we became really good friends. His wife and my wife and our families are really close friends now. And he was there for me the whole time and helped me out through all this type of what I was going through. And without him, I probably wouldn't have recovered as quickly as I have. But I was so fortunate to be able to have him in my corner, plus my wife and my boys. They were outstanding at that, though. So, yeah, you know what? It wasn't easy. It isn't easy. Cancer the word cancer is a terrible word, and but I've been so lucky and blessed to be able to get through this right now and be healthy where I am, and hopefully I never have to ever face those terrible words again.
Well, no, man, that's just so much to unpack there. But sorry, and the doctor you mentioned, your caddy, Patrick. What's his last?
Patrick Pierce,
Patrick
PZ.
Pierce.
Yeah.
My mom went through it, and not. I don't want to use the word silver lining, but probably one of the way it impacted me positively was, she was at the Canadian Cancer Institute here, and the people that put their hand up and say this is going to be, my mission in life, and I'm going to work in that environment. Like we always talk about mindset as coaches and how important that is. There's not a better example of that, in my opinion, than the people that care for cancer patients. And I know for me, I think it'd be damn near impossible not to be impacted by that in terms of how you live the rest of your life.
No, I totally agree. The people that were very fortunate enough to help me, get the right treatments and the right people, and those again the first line workers that are there for you every single day, made it easier for me in some ways to heal again too. And without them, my God, I wouldn't be here. As long as millions of other people that have gone through some sort of battle with cancer, we're so fortunate to have this type of support and technology to battle such a terrible disease.
Manny, I had been told, this was an analogy that made a lot of sense to me, that when it comes to because there's such a push right now with mental health and how we support our athletes, and the analogy that was um, brought to me was that it's kind of like when you go on an airplane, you fly with your kid, and they say that if the oxygen mask drops down, you got to put your own mask on first before you deal with your kid. And I think that the point was that when it comes to mental health, that as a leader, if you're not taking care of yourself and being proactive, it's going to be really challenging for you to support an athlete, a player, staff member in the way that they might need to be supported. And so just like how, when you look at your job, and I mean, listen, it goes, I'm not saying that hockey coaching is more important than any other walk of life, but it is stressful. It just is. And probably more so than a lot of jobs. How do you view, regardless of, getting through cancer, but just as you kind of progress, in any advice to young coaches, and just in terms of how they view their mental health and the investment or intentional investment, and making sure that they're in a good place?
That's a great analogy you use there. Put it in perspective. Exactly. You do have to, at times be selfish. You got to take care of you, and that's something I tell my boys and my wife, that we're no good to each other unless we're good ourselves, and no one can ever be 100% great. That's not possible. Everybody has struggles, and whether it's business, family, or whatever it is, that's just life. But if you have a support group, or if you're able to, understand maybe sometimes when you're not good, it's not always permanent. That's the biggest thing, is that you can get through those things through support, and to be able maybe to help realize that I'm not in a good place at times. I wasn't capable of doing that last year, and I was so lucky enough that my wife was able to see that, and then also, as I said, my Patrick Pierce, a good friend of mine, saw it also too, and they were able to help me and realize that I was something that I was able to, thank God I understood. And I said, listen, yeah, you're right. I'm not myself. And that's something for me, is that you do have to be selfish in some ways. Of Before you can be unselfish, you have to be selfish and make sure you're able to make sure you're taking care of number one. And I always say health is number one in anything. Two is your family, and three is job. And that in that order for me is something I look at all the time. And I know I'm back. I know the people, I've said this before, the people that actually really know me, say I'm back to who I was before I had cancer, and that's something I'm always the glass is is half full compared to half empty. And that's something that I know I wasn't last year. Now looking back on things, as far as the hockey part of it, as far as being coach, I knew that I wasn't able to give everything I possibly had to the players. But that was no fault of them. That was more from myself and where I was. But I've had that opportunity to heal and get good again. And I'm I've said my glass is not half full; it's full, and that's the most important thing.
Well, listen, man, that's so good to hear. Again, I think it's so important for you to, the fact that you're sharing that is so valuable, because as you said, I think there's this perception that, especially with young coaches, that, you're maybe handicapping yourself if you ask for help or if you reach out. But I mean, I can remember, when we started the coaches site, um, Troy Ward, who's a good friend, made a comment to me. He said the key to being a professional coach is in the off season. You need a place near the water because you just need a sense of calm, and that's the only way you can deal with it. But I think it's progressed, and maybe it's a little bit of I think Ted Lasso, that show's done a great example of maybe shedding a positive light. But I mean, one thing I've come to appreciate, the coaches that we work with, whether it is a counselor, performance coach, it seems that today you don't coach unless you have somebody in your life that you can pick up the phone that's impartial. And that might be, venting. We work closely with a guy named Ryan Blank who works with NFL coaches, and part of his deal is he goes, I have a weekly phone call, and I'm like, well, what do you do on those weekly phone calls? He goes, dude, I listen. They need somebody that's not an owner, that's not their GM, that they can just say this is what's going on, and somebody that listens. And he goes, that just sets them up for success on or gives them a better chance on Sunday. So, but yeah, I commend you for sharing your story. I think that's really valuable. Um, Switching gears, what is the best souvenir you brought home from the Sochi Olympics?
Um, we bought a blanket. A blanket. We actually, my wife was there with me, and we got these blankets. And it's a big quilt. I think it was handmade or whatever. But I think majority all the athletes got this blanket. We got this
Yeah.
blanket from Sochi, and actually a tattoo. I got a
No
tattoo of the Sochi
way.
in the arm. So I
Like the
went in.
Austrian, like the, I don't, I'm going to,
Yeah,
the bird, or is that where you're going with
I
it?
got everything. Yeah, I get everything. It's something I waited till I was about 50 years old. I think I was 49 when I got it. And I said I've always wanted one,
Yeah.
and I said I wanted to do something about everything with me and my family and stuff. And I did it. I incorporated everybody in a little bit of my culture, also being Portuguese and also being in Austria for so many years. So I started off small and ended up being a sleeve.
No
So
way.
what I ended up doing, it's all about our life and our family and everything else like that. But that's two of the things that I end up bringing back. So, uh, you know what, my mom, I remember my mom and dad at that time. I'm 49, just turning 50 years old, and I come home with a full sleeve of tattoo, and they were absolutely horrified. and then,
That's
and then
great.
but then I explained it to them exactly why I did it and all this, and then they're all for it. So it was kind of funny. So even at that age, you're so heavily influenced on your parents and what they think.
Totally, totally. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm just curious. Like we work closely with the Austrian Federation now, and really appreciate, like, from a numbers perspective, like there's maybe not a lot of depth in players and in coaching, but they certainly have some people that are incredibly passionate about seeing Austrian hockey thrive. And we're starting to see that in player development. It's, again, there's some baby steps, but man, they're producing some really high end players. Just from a, I guess in hindsight now, how valuable was it to cut your teeth in coaching in an environment where there wasn't all the resources at your disposal, and you probably had to be a bit of a problem solver to get the job done.
Well, my time there was so good, an opportunity for, like you said, just to get into the coaching and the management part of it. After my career, I went over and played over there for a number of years, and I was able to become an Austrian citizen, and then also on top of that, coach and manage, and really so grateful to have the opportunity to coach in the Olympics. But I've seen it where it's come from from the very beginning of how it was until where it is now, and being part of it as far as working at the grassroots level, helping try to develop programs. And they've done a wonderful job as far as all of Austria, as far as how they did template that they're almost academy-like type clubs.
Yes.
Also, and it was built off of what major soccer in Europe is, of the Manchester Uniteds, the Barcelonas, those type of clubs who have a feeder system where they grab these kids at a young age, like an academy, and they start training these kids. Give them proper coaching, professional coaching at a young age, and then hopefully by a certain time, that possibly they can maybe get a couple players every year going into the big club. And that's what the system that they were trying to do, and they're following systems like also from Sweden and Switzerland and all those other major hockey countries in Europe. And excuse me, it's taken time. It's taken some time, a smaller country though. But if you look at some of the players that they're producing, um, it's quite remarkable, and not just like some pretty high draft picks that are coming out of Austria over the last few years. So
Yeah.
hockey's inbred in that culture. There's no question about it. And it's taken some time, but now you're starting to see all those investments that they made over the years to improve their program, especially at the grassroots level, gives these kids an opportunity to to eventually play in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, no, it's been really impressive. And again, I think just a really good example that, as you said, like it does, it starts at the grassroots level to really make that shift. And it's a long-term commitment from, be it the club, the federation, et cetera. Um, I've got a number of pals that coach over in Europe, and they've had a really good run over there. And they've got young families. They've had opportunities, be it to be assistant coaches in the National Hockey League or in the American League. And one of them made the jump this year to the American League. It was a big move. He had a great setup. He was in the Austrian League as well. But talking with some other ones, they're like, man, it's like you come over to North America, because if you're in a good setup in Europe, it's a great schedule, it's family friendly, there's not a lot of travel, but it's like you're jumping on a treadmill or maybe even a hamster wheel. When you come over here, when you made the decision to leave Austria and come to North America, I mean, you landed in Swift Current. Was that intentional to say, hey, because it's the Western League, um, and something I'm familiar with, that's the right fit? Or was it just a situation where you said, hey, I've had a great run over in Europe, it's time for a new challenge, and I'm going to explore whatever options might be available?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly how that happened. My wife and I are over there. We spent so many years over there, and we say, we'd like to let's go back to North America and let's see, if we can get our foot in the door in some capacity. So I was very fortunate enough to get an opportunity in Swift Current. Quite honestly, when I first came back, like anything, I was knocking on doors, and I wasn't having much success at the National Hockey League level or even Western Hockey League. And I made some calls, and yeah, people weren't really, very polite, but said, no, thank you. We've already, have our staff in place. But a real good friend of mine who I ended up coaching over in Europe, Andy Schneider, who now is a scout for the New York Rangers,
Yeah.
was connected in the Swift Current organization. He played there for a number of years, well respected with them, and he just had asked them. He said, please have a chance to have an opportunity to interview Manny," and so he got me in the door, and I was very fortunate and lucky enough to be able to get that position, and it had some success there in a small market, which was a lot of fun. It was real gratifying.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I mean, maybe just going back to when you talk about Terry Simpson and Prince Albert and having that winning culture. I mean, you seemingly win in there. And again, I mean, by no means throwing shade at small market teams, but there's probably a reason we don't see a lot of small market teams in junior hockey, win championships. But you were able to do that. How did you perhaps leverage, the fact that Swift Current is a small town, albeit an incredibly passionate one when it comes to hockey, maybe to your advantage, and as you were putting your team together?
Well, before I even took the job at Swift Current, I did call Terry Simpson. Terry
Oh,
had
no
retired
way.
in the summer up in Prince Albert at Waskesiu, and I called Terry. Actually went up and I was up at a golf tournament up there, and I went up and sat down with him in the afternoon, and I asked him. I said, "Can small market teams still win in the Western League or in the CHL?" And he said, "Absolutely. It's not about how big your city is. It's how good your team and how or good the culture is of your team." And that's something that for me was important. It's so hard to win in this league.
Yeah.
We have so many teams, and also the CHL. So it certainly takes something special to get there, and a little bit of luck along the way, though. But that's something that we wanted to in Swift Current is try to install. We had a really good core group there to begin with to start when I got there. Mark Lamb had done a really good job of making sure that there was a really good young set of players that are ready to take that next level. So for us, it's just more or less implementing how I wanted to play, and then obviously it had to add a few players to round out that group to a championship caliber hockey team, and fortunate enough we were able to do that though. But I think one of the challenges that we did have in Swift Current is a small market team is sometimes it's difficult getting players there.
Yeah.
The players are young, they're small, they're smart, they're intelligent, they're well educated about different places and stuff like that. And so a lot of times it was, well, going to Swift Current was not a big market. It's hard to get there at times, but once they got there, they loved it. And they absolutely loved those, like you said, the passion of the community. The travel was outstanding and probably the best in the Western Hockey League, and the facilities was excellent too. So that's something that once you got players there and they realized how good it is to play in this city like that, it was quite special. And you saw that a couple of years after that in Prince Albert, and they won too. It
Yeah,
was it's good to see that these small market teams, that they do it right. You get that opportunity. It's not just because where you play.
for sure, for sure. And it's interesting that year when you guys won it. It almost reminded me of the Western League last year, where it seemed going into the playoffs last year, like there was legitimately like five or six contenders. And I remember that year, like man, like it was a pick 'em. Like I know you guys go 7 games with, I think it was Regina and then Moose Jaw,
Yeah,
really tight series, and then in the final you play Everett, and if I'm correct, I think the first 4 games were 1 goal games.
yeah.
What did you learn? Like if you were to write if Manny Viveiros writes a book on coaching and there's a chapter on playing in close games, what are the bullet points that we should all be learning from?
Well, I think more than anything, the resiliency of our team. Just to get to the Memorial Cup, of how what we went through. Like Regina's game 7, Moose Jaw game 7, Lethbridge was 6,
Yeah,
and Everett was 6 games. But just the resiliency of our kids, and they had such a quiet confidence, as far as you could just see that they weren't going to be denied. And Paul Maurice said last year with Florida, you're coaching your team to a point where you don't have to coach them anymore, and they take over.
yeah.
And it's a really, for me, it resonated with me with Swift Current, to a point where we got to the point where we didn't really have to coach them anymore. We had some great young players, that good veteran league players, that we had gone through the battles of early rounds, where towards the end there, when we got to those tight games, we weren't nervous, and our guys were calm and cool. And they like, for us, we didn't have to. There weren't certain trigger words that we'd have to say to get them going. They knew, they were saying themselves, and we were there to guide them. But they're the ones that were they were leading the way. It was special, special. It
Well,
really was.
and I'll tell you what. For anybody, and again, just in preparing for this conversation, so obviously the benefits of YouTube, you can go back and see. I went and rewatched the third period of Game 6 against Everett, up until you guys captured. And listen, I think it's special in any sport. Any of us that do what we do, to see a team raise a trophy, it's such a cool feeling. But there was something special in that town. That I don't know how many people were in the rink that night, but I guarantee it broke the fire code. And there's the cowbells going, like, and nobody left. Like you watch the video, like
Yeah.
the rink was packed. 45 minutes after you won it as it was when the puck dropped. It was unreal. So cool. So cool. So really neat experience. And Manny, before we go, I can't leave. You played, and I can't tease a why, but we're doing a little project here. The coaches say we're going back and looking at some iconic coaches, and one of the coaches is Herb Brooks. You played for
Yeah.
in Minnesota. Just quickly, anything that stands out to you? I know we've all seen the movie Miracle, but anything that maybe your experience reinforced, or something that you experienced that might not have made it onto the silver screen.
Well, first of all, Kurt Russell did him to a T. Like, it was
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, that's
I've watched that movie probably about 10 times. So, but just to watch what he did and actually get to know him, and how he coached, and how he was with. He was hard. He was hard, but he was fair, and but he was ahead of his time. Like, some of the stuff that we were doing with that team at that time, as
like
far as
tactically.
tactically.
Yeah.
At that time, we still had the red line in play, but we were stretching guys. Some of our breakouts and stuff like that were way ahead of time. He'd taken some stuff from Europe, tried to bring it back over here, but he was ahead of his time, as far as on that. style of playing and puck possession. Obviously, Oilers at that time were Edmonton Oilers at that time were, the new modern team with
Yeah.
the run and gun style of hockey, puck possession, and he was like very similar as far as system wise, but a lot of the stuff he brought over Europe is a staple to today's game, as far as stretching wingers out of the zone, flying wingers, and puck possession. Instead of just dumping it, having puck possession, and it was with our group. It was a little bit at first. Like this is not how the game is played here. But
Interesting. Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. He loved me, and because I was a smaller puck moving defenseman. And this is what he told me here, quote unquote. He says the game eventually is going to be how you play the game with
No,
defensemen.
really?
I think
No
I was
way.
100 pounds at that time, but I was relatively mobile and moved the puck.
Yeah.
This is where the game is going someday, and he was right. He was right though. And then unfortunately he got fired, and then I didn't get a chance after that. I would say I'd get a chance. I had plenty of chances.
Yeah.
But it was for me that resonated with me so much. Just what he said.
That's amazing. That is so cool. That is so cool. Also cool. I don't know if you saw this on the weekend. The Wild introduced their new third uniforms
Yeah,
and they're replicas of the old North Star uniforms, and
yeah,
they're
yeah,
stellar. They're amazing. They're amazing.
yeah.
Hey Manny, and I know that you guys you're in the thick of it here with the season kicking off, but just one last one. Let's take the wins and losses, take the standings aside. What does a successful season look like for you and the Vancouver Giants this year?
Well, from obviously from the hockey side is we want to get our foot in the door in the playoffs, so we want to continue on the success that they had last year. If you can add a little bit to this group this year, a little bit more, then it's a success. Like I think this team is building to something special in the next couple of years. We just want to get these kids to improve in that area as a team wise. But if I can see these kids develop, on an individual basis, and more importantly as young men, as far as people, as far as how they are in society. That's for us as a win. And I know Ron, talking with him when I was decided to come to Vancouver, that was a big part of it. He said to me, he says, "Man, winning and losing is very important, obviously, but the most important is that we want these young men when they leave here is that they'll always remember the Vancouver Giants in a positive way, and their experience here will help them in some capacity moving forward in their next ventures or careers." And that's something for me. I've always gone by that template. As far as that's the most important. What we have as coaches or teachers is how we can help in any possible way be a positive influence on these young men.
Love it. That's awesome, Manny. It's great to meet you, man. Like I say, we've got some mutual pals, and great to finally put a face to a name. And yeah, best of luck to you and the Giants this year.
My pleasure, guys. I follow your site all the time and watch all this stuff. Yeah, well, that's awesome stuff. Really appreciate having you on.